Hey traders, welcome to another video week in review here. Some of my ES trading for the week of June the 7th to June the 10th. Didn't trade the Monday as usual, day off for me, long weekend. Pretty much always do that. And you can see here, pretty good week. It was one that, I did trade a little bit less maybe than I normally would. Still kind of being a little bit cautious. We're not getting a ton of volume in the markets right now. So being fairly selective, fairly patient, but overall a really good result here. As you can see, 15 points. And that's really the takeaway lesson, for the week is just making sure, if you've got your plan, you stay disciplined, stay patient with it. Because there were times I had to wait, half an hour for a trade, wait an hour even for a trade, and I'm willing to do that because I know that the edge will play out. So we'll take a look at some of the trading days. There are videos that go into a bit more depth, more detail on all these days on YouTube as well. But we'll quickly go through those trading days here. So starting with the Tuesday, this was one that actually there is no video for this one. It's the only one that I didn't have a chance to put a video together. But there was only a point on this one here, just a couple trades, a long here for a point and a half, and then a short where I lost a half a point, lost a couple ticks. This was a tricky one because we'd had a bit of a run up, but we were, we had a pretty clear area here that had reacted the prior day, and so we had the possibility at least of a bit of a head and shoulders coming in here. So I had to be pretty cautious based on that bigger pattern, possibility of getting some significant selling coming in here. So there wasn't really all that much appealing to trade into that level until we broke through, and trading off of it has a much better chance of kind of following through. But if it starts pushing up into this area here, you can notice we had a few touches up in and around this zone here in the 2106, 2107. So I want to be very cautious into that area, unless there's a lot of momentum. And as you can see here, there really wasn't. So, I took that trade, was basically aiming for this area, was looking for a couple points, maybe a bit more if there was good momentum there. But things were really struggling, just like they had early in the day. And so after giving a couple attempts for the market to move up, I just took the profit that was available there, got a fill on the edge. Even if it had come back without that fill, it would have taken it at the same spot, which basically just trying to take that fill before that edge here. Turned out that it popped up, could have had an extra couple ticks on it. But in these sort of lower momentum markets, I don't really mind bringing in a target a little bit, being a bit adaptive in my approach. So, I'm not going to do that when the markets are moving well and we're getting good swings, but when things are really limited and the market is, moving with very low momentum, moving with kind of conservative swings, I don't mind being conservative in response. And then we had some good selling coming off this area, and because this was a fairly key area here, I took what was really a quite aggressive trade, and I knew that going in. We kind of pushed down into this area here, didn't really follow through, so I just brought that risk right in. Again, knowing this was an aggressive trade, if it doesn't fall through right away, if that momentum's not there, I'm not going to want to take much risk. But things were so limited on the day, I pretty much just called it early and didn't keep trading with that expectation that we'd probably get better moving markets, higher momentum markets on future days. And that's another thing that's worth thinking about if you're trading. If you're wanting to do this, with consistent profitability over the long term, you don't have to trade. You don't have to be really active and force trades. If a day is not moving all that well, there's going to be plenty of other days, plenty of other markets, plenty more setups out there. Markets are not going anywhere essentially. So there's no reason you can't just walk away from the screens, come back for another day when the market is hopefully moving a lot better. So on this one here, this was a better day here, Wednesday, 3 trades, 4.25. We had a little bit of a false break up here, pushed through, so I just traded off that level again. Caught a nice runner here down to the next area. Could have caught more. As mentioned before, you can get more detail on this in the recap videos if you'd like. Tried a short in here, didn't really fall through, so brought that risk right in because we were kind of sort of oscillating here and just we're operating in a range. But then with a really high momentum move, great opportunity here to trade back into that level. It's pretty simple stuff in here, failed long, but only risking a couple ticks in here, making 8 ticks or 2 points, trading back up in the level. And we're in a ranging environment, so I'm not trying to chase anything. I'm just trying to trade back into these areas. And we get a good move down, I'm trading back to the outside of the market. So it's just going from basically the middle to the outer edge. And you can trade off these edges as well, but if you'll notice here, they weren't that defined. We had some, a little bit of an overshoot in here. We're kind of, little undershoots, and then heading back to the area in here, we were kind of pushing a little bit lower, pushing a little bit lower, pushing a little bit lower before we rejected. So without these areas being really clean and clearly defined within a few ticks, I don't really want to trade off the edges. And that's really because I want to keep a very limited risk if possible. But these sort of situations, these sort of markets can overshoot a little bit, take out your stop, and then come right back within the range. So you can get those false break scenarios, and that's the sort of thing I want to avoid. So I am willing to trade off those edges of those ranges. You've seen some of my trades before when there's a good trend present, willing to do it in the direction of a trend. But if we're just purely ranging like this, there's no good prior trend that's occurring where you kind of get that trend consolidation pattern and then potentially another trend continuation. If we don't have that, I'm not going to try to force anything. I'm just going to wait to see how these areas react and trade towards those edges and just keep things simple, keep things straightforward, and allows you to be pretty consistent. So, and then Friday in here, we did have basically a trade off of a level that was in the direction of a prior trend here. So that's kind of what I'm talking about. So, it could have come back again, and I would have still been potentially willing to trade off that area, even if it had ranged a little bit. So that's kind of what I'm talking about when you have a bigger trend. If you want to check this out, you can go onto a 555 tick chart. You can take a look at some of that pre-market stuff, see kind of what I'm talking about with that trend to the downside. But from there, just kept kind of trading it until that momentum faded out. And this was an aggressive long because it's against that trend of the day. So no follow through, just going to take what's available there. And I had one trade that was kind of a non-SDA trade for the week, but of course, including it in the results because this is on the charts. So this isn't one that really fits our normal criteria. Everything else is something that's very structured and defined within the plan. This one, a little bit different, but it's kind of a false break scenario here where things get wound up tightly and can shoot out. But it's very contextual, and you have to be pretty careful with these. So some of the more advanced traders do trade some of these. I've talked about it with our group of students in the past, but not something that I would consider part of the regular plan, a setup that doesn't come up all that often anyways. So again, very contextual. You have to be kind of careful with it because it's often a counter trend move, as this one was, but allowed because of the tightness here and that consolidation, allowed for a pretty explosive move to the upside and a really nice profit on a day that was moving in a fairly limited fashion. And then actually I ended up taking a couple losses to end the week. So not the way you really want to end things, but not too big a deal. It was still a very good day, so I didn't mind taking a little bit of that risk at the end and seeing if I couldn't catch one or two more good trades. But still worked out very nicely. 3 very solid days. One day that I consider a bit of a wash. If you lose a point, gain a point, it's not too big a deal. But those 3 solid days especially ended up basically coming out to around 15 points, which is a little bit near the upper end of the target that I go for some of our more veteran traders that are at a level of good consistency. But anytime that you can even make 5 points a week consistently, you can do a lot in this business. You just kind of ramp up the position size. But consistency is the key. It doesn't matter if you're making 5, 10, or 100 points in a week. What matters is that you're consistent kind of week after week within a certain range. You don't want to be losing 10 points one week, up 15 another, losing 25 another. Even if you're making profit in that kind of bigger picture, it's very difficult to kind of deal with the emotions of those swings and to ramp up your position size when you don't have that week-to-week consistency. So that's a really important thing to aim for, even before really considering the type of profitability that you can potentially achieve and what you can do if you build up position sizes. Consistency is number one. So hopefully you guys had a great week, and just let me know if you have any questions about the trading or anything like that. I'd be happy to help, and talk to you guys in the next week in review.